Terraria reinvented the survival craft blueprint. Its version of the genre has permeated the gaming landscape far more than Minecraft's original, and I'm honestly surprised more people aren't talking about it. Along the way, it spawned an entirely new class of games built on its design philosophy, shaped one of the best-selling franchises in history, pushed Minecraft itself to evolve, and inspired an indie game that has reached further than itself in every quantifiable metric. Whoa. I even got to hear from the developer of this game on some of the particulars of Terraria's influence, so I'll share that and the other examples by the end of the video. There's a common thread running through these examples that defines how Terraria changed the gaming landscape at large since its release in 2011, and its creator, Andrew Spinks, hinted at it in a 2023 tweet. He wrote, "Wanting more of a purpose out of Minecraft is a big part of what drove me to make Terraria. This purpose comes through in an undeniable way, as the pace of advancement and progressively more challenging bosses create a sense of drive and urgency in Terraria that is far heightened in comparison to what is found in Minecraft." Yet, in his quest for purpose, Spinks didn't build on Minecraft by adding cutting-edge graphics. He took a risk and chose the opposite route, simplifying the visual style even further by sacrificing the third dimension. But in making this sacrifice, he was very intentional about what he would add back to the game to achieve the sense of purpose he didn't see in Minecraft. He revolutionized crafting, giving tools unique abilities and variety far beyond a simple progression of alloys. He also developed more complex means of resource collection to fuel these crafting possibilities. Combined with quick pacing and boss-gated advancement, this model showed its promise in Terraria, and made other developers go, "Wait, you can do that in a sandbox game?" It also emphasized that a pixelated 2D world could still work in the modern gaming landscape. It's no surprise that it inspired an entire genre of games that followed its blueprint, such as 2019's Forager, which even lists Terraria as an inspiration on its official website. I've dubbed this genre Terraria-like. I'm very creative like that. It's easy to see why these Terraria-like games adopted Terraria's model for generating purpose. It's fun and feasible for a small indie team to accomplish. But there's another reason that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's a product of what Andrew Spinks chose to leave out of Terraria: meaning. Terraria gives you endless purpose, but rarely asks you to care about why. For all the excitement and satisfaction that its progression yields, there's no potent storyline, no emotional hook. The game actually distances the player from any emotional connection by forcing them to do objectionable things, such as killing a helpful guide in order to advance to the next stage. This absence left a void that other developers were eager to fill, implicitly inviting them to try applying Terraria's style of gameplay to a more meaningful storyline. The most notorious game to try this is, of course, 2016's Starbound, which basically takes Terraria and throws it into a sandbox universe of procedurally generated worlds. But it also gives you the option to take on the forces that destroyed your home planet in a story-driven campaign that gradually reveals itself to the player as you progress. Many others in the genre use these opt-in or slow-revealing storylines, with another notable example being 2024's Core Keeper. Some Terraria-like games aren't even sandboxes at all. 2020's Aground is fully narrative-driven, for example. Almost all the developers of these games have acknowledged Terraria's influence, and they'd be crazy not to. Just look at them. The genre isn't showing signs of stopping either. Tinkerlands, released in May, follows the same characteristic game plan, and Core Keeper's developers are doubling down with Kiora, which will resemble Terraria even more than its predecessor. But spawning an entire genre of video games modeled after itself is only one component of Terraria's influence, which can also be seen in plenty of 3D games as well. Its pairing of Minecraft's survival craft principles with further bosses and progression has come to define the survival craft genre altogether. Terraria was the first game mentioned by Takuro Mizobe, producer of Palworld and CEO of its development company Pocket Pair, in his list of survival craft games he played that shaped his understanding of the genre prior to Palworld's release. And yes, this was long before the recent crossover update. See, although it's been dubbed Pokemon with guns, Palworld is actually an open-world survival craft game with not only guns, but strategic automation fueled by many creative types of enslavement, and the ability to butcher your loosely named pals, and the ability to do all this to people as well. Yet this formula bore fruit, as Palworld has achieved over 32 million sales to date and received strong reviews from the depraved monsters who play it. In addition to its sense of moral turpitude, Palworld's style of base building can be traced back to Terraria. As far as I could find, Terraria was the first survival game to encourage players to build bases centered not only around themselves, but around NPCs. This is the name of the game in Palworld. But most significantly, Palworld is one of the many games to take the resource acquisition, crafting, building, mining, and general exploration of a natural world that Terraria showed could be applied to a game with plenty of bosses and progression, and apply them to a game with plenty of bosses and progression. Another example is Valheim, which was also cited by Mizobi in his aforementioned list of survivalcraft games. Interestingly, the hit 2021 Viking-themed survival sandbox was itself also heavily influenced by Terraria. The Valheim developers have gone so far as to describe their game as a mix between Terraria, Zelda, and Dark Souls, pointing to the quote, building and resources and such as the Terraria-like components of the game. Like Terraria, both Valheim and Palworld feature unique biomes that implicitly encourage the player to explore each one out of resource necessity. And, like Terraria, they require exaggerated quantities of ingredients to craft items, far more than games like Minecraft, pushing players to explore further to acquire them. And, like Terraria, building a home is not optional in either game. It's actually necessary for things like setting your spawn point. In Valheim, not only is this done in a procedurally generated world, like Terraria, but these dynamics go on to shape every downstream component of the game, and, as a result, Terraria's influence on it goes far deeper. In Valheim, you play as a Viking tasked with proving yourself worthy of Valhalla by defeating Odin's enemies in the fictional 10th realm of the World Tree of Norse mythology, advancing to the next age with items dropped by each boss, going from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age to the Silver Age, etc. The items and tech that you gain will enable you to improve your base, improve your efficiency, and strengthen your character. The latter is especially important because, as you progress, previously explored areas will become home to increasingly difficult foes, and you also have to worry about increasingly difficult randomly occurring invasions. Your weapons and armor can be tailored to a chosen build. Archer, mage, tank, etc., giving you flexibility in how you approach combat. There's only so much you can accumulate though before it's time to take on the next boss to avoid plateauing. This creates the game loop of exploration, resource collection, crafting, base building, boss fights, and repeating. Sound familiar? All of this is literally Terraria, complete with the ability to use the same player in multiple worlds. But like some of the 2D games mentioned earlier, the Valheim developers recognized that Terraria's model would pair well with a touch of meaning. Odin's mission and your character's vague backstory provide some narrative context, but it's really the beauty of the world itself that implicitly touches on something deeper. Let's revisit the Valheim developers' idea that Valheim is a mix between Terraria, Zelda, and Dark Souls. Here's where things get really interesting. In another interview, lead Valheim developer Henrik Tornquist clarified that the Zelda title in question was Breath of the Wild, the 2017 blockbuster that IGN crowned the greatest game of all time. Ironically, Breath of the Wild was itself inspired by Terraria. When asked about his influences while making the game, director Hidemaru Fujibayashi shared, "I was rather inspired by playing Minecraft and Terraria. I was able to learn from the gameplay and the possibilities found within. I could learn from the sense of adventure, exploration, and how it inspired curiosity." Once again, it's the Terraria pioneered pairing of these sandbox principles with bosses and purpose that really defines Breath of the Wild. The connection he draws between exploration and curiosity is especially telling, and honestly speaks to Fujibayashi's genius. Let me explain. But first, if you want to go deeper on these connections, or other games and stories that matter, or just want to hear about why I'm back after a 10-year ban, join me on my bi-weekly gaming streams for long-form discussion and Q&A. Details in the description. Now here's why this connection matters. Although Terraria introduced greater progression and purpose to the survival sandbox genre, it didn't feel the need to hold the player's hand through that progression with instructions or in-game tutorials. The guide can offer tips and crafting recipes, but they only go so far. You are invited to discover the world's secrets for yourself and how they can help you to progress. The Terrarian world is much more than a pretty face. Every element of its environment can play some role in helping the player to advance in the game, even more than in most survivalcraft games like Minecraft. It works by instilling curiosity in the player and allowing them to figure out how. We see definite elements of this principle in Valheim and Palworld, but Breath of the Wild applies it especially masterfully to its own world. Because there are few explicit directions, this curiosity Fujibayashi speaks of is meant to encourage exploration and a discovery of the keys that the world offers to advance. This can come in the form of ingredients to craft various items, NPCs that can offer advice or physical essentials, or creative mechanics to allow the player to access parts of the map that are not immediately accessible. All of these elements are heavily Terrarian in nature, and Breath of the Wild represents a high point of Terraria's influence. It's also one of the many enduring elements of Terraria's legacy, as Tears of the Kingdom retained its predecessor's open-world format, and according to series producer Eiji Ayanuma, subsequent releases will retain it as well. And for context, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have sold over 55 million copies between them to date. Yet Breath of the Wild reveals something else about Terraria's legacy. See, many a gamer has pointed out its impact on Palworld. Breath of the Wild helped inspire Valheim, then both Breath of the Wild and Valheim heavily influenced Palworld. They literally just took Ike, made him look like a Pokemon, and threw deer at the end of his name. This illustrates how Terraria's influence works. It doesn't just shape games directly, it permeates the industry by inspiring revolutionary titles that carry its blueprint forward, influencing the next generation of games in turn. After all, Breath of the Wild is widely known as one of the most influential games in recent memory, and has inspired countless titles such as Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Elden Ring. And of course, Terraria's impact carries Minecraft's DNA with it. Yet, in a full circle dynamic, the best-selling video game of all time has come to borrow many ideas from the game that it itself inspired. Minecraft has a very different feel than it used to. Since its official release in 2011, a ton of features have been added to the game, including raids, additional bosses, additional foes, currency for purchasing from NPCs, further customized weapons in combat, etc. It's not a stretch to say that its updates wouldn't look the same without Terraria's influence. And feel free to correct me in the comments, but doesn't Terraria use copper-based weapons and armor or something? And I don't know, flight, tridents, barrels, lanterns, banners? Nah, I mess around, but that's not a knock on Mojang. They've long expressed admiration for Terraria, even adding the splash text "also try Terraria" back in beta 1.8, and Jens Bergensten, the lead designer of Minecraft, has shared a particular feature that Terraria directly inspired him to add. In October of 2012, Minecraft's Pretty Scary update introduced the Wither, a boss summoned by the player using a mechanic never before seen in the game. Bergensten once shared the inspiration behind it. It all started with the beacons. We needed a way of obtaining them. I wanted it to be some kind of boss fight, and I was inspired by Terraria. In that game, you always initiate the boss fights yourself, so I already knew it should be some sort of summoning, and a cult too, relating to the undead of Minecraft. This highlights inspiration to both the mechanic and the design choice, as Terraria has featured a cult summoning ritual since its launch. Honestly, I feel like Terraria's a little low-key occult obsessed. Feels like whenever they add a new feature to the game, they're always like, come on, don't you want an extra accessory slot? All you have to do is eat a demon heart. It's like, dude. Mojang continued to follow Terraria's lead for summoning bosses with the Warden, who was added to Minecraft in 2022's The Wild update. This boss can only be summoned by activating Skulk Shriekers, these oddities found in the underground Deep Dark biome. It mirrors Plantera, Golem, the Eater of Worlds, and other boss fights in Terraria which must be initiated at the site of their underground summoners. Beyond gameplay, even Minecraft's world design has evolved in Terraria's direction. Take the pink trees, or lush underground biomes. To top it all off, the style of play on many popular Minecraft servers mimics Terraria nowadays. Hypixel Skyblock, the most popular server game there is, features buff-granting accessories, fast travel, mana usage, conversational NPCs with names, diversified weapons and armor, which may impart set bonuses, loss of money but not items on death, and a million other tweaks that have given the gameplay an uncanny resemblance. They even removed Minecraft's trademark wear and tear on the tools in favor of Terraria's perennial style. Yet as tempting as it is to call Terraria's impact on Minecraft its crowning achievement, I'd hesitate to do that because, honestly, Minecraft will never do Terraria as well as Terraria. The best impact that any game or piece of media can have is to inspire or positively influence the creation of something even better than itself. And I believe Terraria has done so. Some might argue that other titles mentioned in this video outshine Terraria, but there's an indie game that's more comparable that surpassed it in user approval, Metacritic rating, concurrent players, you name it. That game is Stardew Valley, and I had the privilege of getting to hear from its creator about Terraria's influence on it. Stardew Valley was made entirely by one man, Eric Barone. His motivation uncannily mirrors Andrew Spinks' motivation for making Terraria. He wanted more purpose out of a game he loved. That game was Harvest Moon, the 1996 Nintendo farm simulator that would go on to spawn a series. In a 2016 interview, Barone explained, "My idea with Stardew Valley was to address the problems I had with Harvest Moon, as well as create more purpose with tried and true gameplay elements such as crafting and quests." Terraria had shown that a game could do this, could bring more purpose to the concept that inspired it and be seen as much more than a spin-off of the inspiration. In an older interview during development, with regard to the first few titles in the Harvest Moon series, Barone said, "I always craved another game in that style, but with even more stuff." That's what got me started on Stardew Valley. I also played a lot of Minecraft, Terraria, and SimCity during development so far, and definitely drew some ideas from those games. Of those three, it looks like Terraria provided the most material for Barone to turn his farm simulator inspiration into so much more. For starters, it had improved receptivity to 2D indie games with simple graphics, but it also showed what even more stuff could look like in such an indie game, as we've seen throughout this video. Terraria feels like a sandbox of unending sand. Stardew Valley feels equally unending, and so many of its features trace back to Terraria. Buff granting accessories, vanity clothes, underground vesicles that can be smashed for loot, hostile bugs, bats, and skeletons, color-coded slimes with green being the easiest, advanced foraging, and even certain NPCs like a wizard or a dwarf who sells bombs. The list goes on, but I wanted to hear from Barone himself about the extent of Terraria's inspiration. Colmediros, the designer who worked with Barone on Stardew Valley the board game, was nice enough to ask him for me, and Barone, being the homie he is, took the time to answer. His response was relayed to me as follows. He acknowledged that his memory was hazy after so many years, but that he had liked Terraria's usage of crafting and its overall sandbox nature. He added that some of Terraria's randomly occurring events, or certain items and their functionality, also provided inspiration. This is pretty monumental when you think about it. Crafting, events, and the game's sandbox nature are huge components of Stardew Valley that add fun, excitement, and unpredictability. The culmination of these inspirations is that Stardew Valley became a blend of a sandbox game and a farm simulator, a country life RPG as Barone calls it, though even that title hardly captures everything it offers. These aforementioned characteristics of Stardew are what make it such an amazing experience, along with the emotion and meaning that Barone wove into the components of his inspiration like so many of the other titles in this video tried to do. The premise of inheriting your late grandfather's farm and beginning anew after experiencing corporate burnout touches something in every player's desires. The NPCs feel real, as do the themes that are intertwined with their lives. The game asks nuanced questions related to corporate dominance and the role of community, helping it to deliver more than just a dopamine hit for those who play it. It's widely considered a masterpiece, and it's hard to imagine a greater achievement for Terraria's influence. This video just scratches the surface of Terraria's impact. It took me forever to get it out because I kept learning about more things to include the more I worked on it, and I still didn't even touch on crossover updates, which Terraria actually helped popularize among indie games. On a personal note, to expand on the ban I alluded to earlier, I used to make Terraria videos here back in 2013 and 2014 under the name EpicHobbit21 before being banned for over 10 years. In February this year, YouTube actually apologized and reinstated my channel. I recently covered the whole story in a video, but now I'll be uploading weekly video essays on meaningful games and stories under the new name ThemePunked. In a few weeks, I'll even cover an email I received from Notch, the creator of Minecraft, back in 2013. And yes, our correspondence was bizarre, but not for the reasons you might expect. Really excited to share that, but before I go, I'd like to thank James, Jacob, Luis, and Madison for their help preparing for this video, as well as Imcade, Fox, and GamerGar for allowing me to use their Palworld footage, channels linked in the description, and all of you for watching my first gaming video in over 11 years. It still hardly feels real being back, and I really appreciate you stopping by for the ride. I'll see you next week.